Hello and welcome to a re-recording of our November 11th District Advisory Committee General Body Meeting. This recording, along with presentation slides and other handouts, will be available on our website at kcpublicschools.org/DAC or DAC. This is our agenda from the meeting. It kicked off with a welcome from our DAC Executive Committee Vice Chair, Susan Stocking, thanking everyone for their time, and to give a little bit of information about the purpose of this meeting, which is to look at the transformation process of our current student code of conduct and why that work is important. Next, Ms. Stocking made an announcement about District Advisory Committee, Executive Committee elections and open positions. And Crystal Everett, along with myself, Courtney Adams, the Family and Community Engagement Coordinator, made some announcements that I will get to in just a moment. So the District Advisory Committee is a committee that provides support, information, resources, and guidance to parents and families, to schools, to district administration, to parent organizations, and to the school board. So we have some open positions on our executive committee that we would love for interested and engaged families and community members, family members and community members to join us. If you are interested in running for one of the executive committee positions, please contact Susan Stocking at the email address listed below. And next, Ms. Everett made an announcement about an event that has passed already. It was a parent workshop. For our parent university, we've been off to a strong start. Previous meeting recordings, as well as a wealth of other information related to technology, resources using Tyler is available on our parent university website. And I would love to hear your ideas on future topics. So whatever topics or content areas, parents, families, community members, schools, whatever you think would be useful information for your school communities and for our KCPS community, please send those to me via email. Next, I will turn it over to Dr. Woodley for her presentation on creating a trauma-informed student code of conduct. Dr. Woodley?
Thank you so much, Ms. Adams and the DAC committee for allowing me the opportunity to kind of present on the great work we're doing in Kansas City Public Schools. One of our major initiatives, we have a strategic plan in place to become a model trauma-informed school district. And so our work that we are looking to do is to really align to make sure that when we address student behaviors, that we're looking at it through a trauma-informed lens. So I would like to kind of start this presentation off to just really kind of get an understanding of what do we mean by trauma and what does it mean about being trauma-informed. So we have a couple of videos that we're going to watch. Also, we're going to actually engage in a questionnaire for your own information. We're not asking you to share this information with anyone. It's just to kind of give you an understanding of adverse childhood experiences and how the role that plays in the developing brains of children. So we're going to watch a little bit of this video clip of this TED Talk, and then we're going to continue on with the presentation.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. it's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day,
we're gonna stop right there.
Walked into my office
with that video, and we're gonna dig into our next phase is to really kind of have an understanding of what is when the speaker is speaking about adverse childhood experiences and being able to identify or address some of those concerns to be able to kind of find out what supports are needed. So we actually have a copy of the screener here. You can actually click on the screen if you're watching this presentation later in order for you to actually pull up the screener. So we're going to take a couple moments, and I ask that you just take a moment and identify the questions. It's a 10-question questionnaire, and then if you just answered yes to any of the questions, at the end you will add up your number of yeses, and that will give you your ACE score, and it'll determine what level of adverse childhood experiences that you have been exposed to growing up. So this is just information about you. This is important, parents, for us to kind of understand our own adverse childhood experiences, and then kind of identify what experiences that our students or your babies have experienced as well. So I wanted you guys to have an opportunity to engage in the questionnaire as we continue on with our next video. This kind of break down what does an ACE score represent.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences. extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. And Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
So as you can see in the video, it talked about, schools becoming trauma informed. And I talked about that when I opened up our presentation, that our goal is to become a model trauma informed school district and be able to look at what's going on deeper, because we know behavior is a symptom and not the disease, and being able to identify what are the issues of concerns and the reason for the problem behavior versus just leaning towards suspension. And so when we begin to look at our code of conduct, we begin to identify that some areas in our code of conduct was considered punitive. We had a lot of zero tolerance policies that did not really meet the needs of our students. And so we wanted to make sure that we begin to look at our code of conduct and all of our policies to make sure that we're looking at them through a trauma-informed lens. So I hope you had an opportunity to really kind of evaluate the information that was presented in the ACEs screener, with the understanding that we have a hotline number for each one of our schools. And if you think your student that is in need of some social and emotional supports, we are here to serve you. So make sure that you're able to reach out to your school to get in touch with your clinician, so we can be able to partner with you to make sure that we're providing the highest level of care to make sure we meet the social and emotional needs of your kids directly as well. Another area that we looked at when we begin this work on evaluating our code of conduct is to look at the role that bias play in our discipline practices. This is a video, not with Kansas City Public Schools, but it's a video about other school districts across the country that are engaged in this work as well. So I wanted you to kind of see the information that we're doing. We have implemented a Office of Equity in Kansas City Public Schools that are addressing the discipline disparities as well as any other equity disparities across our school district. But that's one of the things we're looking at as well, is how equitable is our discipline practices across the school district. So let's watch this video clip and we can talk further about this work.
On any given school day in America, 250 children are suspended or expelled for bad behavior. 50,000 children were suspended at least once in 2016. And here's the shocking part. Those are just the preschoolers, the 3- and 4-year-olds. Boys make up more than 80% of the suspensions and expulsions in preschool. And according to the Department of Education, throughout their school careers, Black students are almost 4 times as likely to be suspended than white students. Research shows that being suspended or expelled affects social and emotional development, academic performance, and life trajectories. Zero tolerance policies were supposed to make schools safer and discipline more fair, but critics say that didn't happen. I recently sat down with Cami Anderson to talk about this. She's a former head of the Newark Public Schools and now runs the Discipline Revolution Project. What exactly is at issue here?
Yeah, I think we know 2 things. One is we have serious adult biases at play, not just for Black and Latino students, but also for students with disabilities. It's important to remember that these biases around discipline are about race and other things. That's number 1. And number 2, we know what works in terms of supporting healthy development, holding kids accountable in ways that help them learn.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are people who would say, and I'll play devil's advocate, right? Well, maybe these kids are just the tough kids. Maybe we should be looking at this as, isn't this data telling us that they're problem kids?
Well, just in the last year, we had 2 pretty rigorous studies come out, one showing that Black boys receive about triple the amount of negative attention as their peers, often for the exact same behaviors. And we saw a study of Black girls where adults labeled them less innocent than their peers. So we know what biases are at play.
Punitive discipline is sort of like parenting 101, right? Kid does something, we punish them so they have negative consequences for their behavior. Why does that not work?
Well, first you have to build trust with our young people, and trust is built in times of conflict, right? So when something happens, certainly there needs to be consequences, but there also needs to be a conversation about what caused that moment and how can you prevent it in the future. We should embrace the notion that young people can learn social and emotional skills just like they can learn algebra or any other academic skill.
For Black boys who are being disciplined more harshly, is there a correlation to the number of teachers who match them racially?
We see all kinds of good outcomes when we have more diverse teaching populations, in particular African-American teachers, African-American men. There are all kinds of studies that show not only does it help with discipline, but all kinds of life outcomes.
So what should be done, right? Because if you are the parent of a kid who's not a discipline problem, but is around a kid who's a discipline problem, that can be really problematic.
We know a lot of things about conducting restorative circles so the community can repair, doing one-on-one mediation. It's really interesting to see a young person have to own up to their mistakes in a circle. Talk about accountability. No young person wants to do that. That, for them, weighs much
Might be
more.
the worst punishment.
Right? It weighs much more profoundly on them than, say, leaving school for the day and having the day off, right? So we want them to be accountable, and we know different and alternative ways for that to happen that are successful.
Is this just a conversation for the school, teachers, administrators, or do parents have a role in this discussion about what, is their kids, basically?
Usually you only get a call as a parent, I know this to be the case with my own son, that says your son did X, which is not actually helpful in solving the problem. So our position is, how do we change the conversation between families and schools so that we're all working on a common set of goals where we feel a sense of hope and purpose that we're working towards something.
Cami Anderson of the Discipline Revolution Project, formerly the superintendent of the Newark Public Schools. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So as you can see highlighted in that video was some information about the role that bias plays in discipline. And we are being intentional. We have an implicit bias training that all of our staff members are going through. So we're taking a deep dive in this area of equity and making sure that we're being equitable in all of our practices. Additionally, we have began to launch a program called Restorative Justice, our restorative justice movement that started at Southeast High School and is now being expanded now to the 2 middle schools, Central Middle and Northeast Middle, because we're seeing that there's some promising practices to put in place with our restorative justice movement. And so we also are looking at how can we expand this program across the school district since we're seeing such great results. And so those are some things that we're doing to address the areas of bias and the need for us to look at discipline in a different and new way. One of the other areas that we are looking at is understanding secondary trauma and making sure we're supporting teachers. The next slide kind of talks about, or the next video talks about the role that trauma plays on in teachers. And so we know that our teachers are educated with the best education in schools around the country, but one of the things that they don't learn is how to work the essential strategies of working with students that that need additional support, that maybe have experienced some trauma and have some behaviors that are considered to be extreme. And so sometimes when you're working with students that have some major concerns, that can be a heavy weight on teachers. And so this next video, again, is not a video from Kansas City Public Schools, but it's an example of a student that has experienced some trauma and is acting out in a certain way and how it's affecting teachers. And so we wanted to make sure that we give you the total picture of the work that we're doing. Now in Kansas City Public Schools, what we're looking at is all of our teachers going through a 2-day discipline that restores training, that they learn how to de-escalate situations. And I already talked about how the additional supports are being pushed out into schools to make sure that we are being proactive instead of reactive in supporting students that have experienced trauma. But watch this video with me.
The videos are shocking. Classrooms torn apart, desks and tables upended.
I've had my things thrown around the room, ripped off the walls. I've been punched, kicked, stabbed with a pencil.
How common is that?
Pretty common.
Ashley May quit her teaching job in Des Moines at the end of last school year, frustrated and frankly scared by some of her students.
He would body check me and grab me by my whistle and yank me down. And then I had another student who pulled back and just threw a punch at me.
And these kids are how old?
7.
Like other teachers who took these photos, May would call for a room clear, a practice used when a student gets out of control. Leave the disruptive child in the classroom while the other kids are moved out.
Is clearing the room fair to the other students?
It's not fair. It's not fair to anybody. The other students don't get to learn. I can't teach. My stuff's getting destroyed. That student can't learn.
We understand that the challenges that...
Des Moines Superintendent Tom Ahart says room clears are a last resort that have become more common in the past decade. Enrollment is up, funding is down, and there aren't enough mental health providers for kids.
The expectations on schools have changed dramatically, but the challenges that we're asked to deal with have increased while resources have been reduced.
Your teachers are caught in the middle of all that.
Absolutely.
It's happening nationwide, education experts say, because of stricter rules on teachers using physical restraint.
So if schools have to be much more careful about restraining or removing kids from class, then one of the sort of simpler things to do is to remove all of the other kids.
Bob Cunningham focuses on education policy at the nonprofit Understood.
You need to figure out why that kid is acting that way, right? Behavior's not accidental, Kate. It's a communication method.
10-year-old Xander White has special needs. He's the student who stabbed Ashley May with a pencil.
And that makes me feel so bad because I know he's a good kid.
His mom, Dawn, feels badly for the other students, but says there's no other place for her son.
I want him to be socializing and, you know, hanging out with kids, but I do think that he needs to be in a smaller setting.
Ashley May hopes bringing the problem to light means more support for teachers.
As this issue gets more attention and people understand, hopefully it pushes people to make a change.
Lester, the education experts I spoke with said the solution is smaller class sizes, more teacher training, more mental health specialists. But of course, Lester, all of that costs money.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest.
So as you can see in the video, it talked about what was needed, which was more teacher training, more mental health professionals, and more supports for students, and even it talks about, you know, class sizes and all those things we have already begun to address in Kansas City Public Schools. We have an awesome school board that supports us in this work, and that's providing social and emotional supports is one of their key priorities, and making sure that we're meeting the social and emotional needs of kids. So we have been able to triple the number of social and emotional supports over the last couple of years here in Kansas City Public Schools. And like I said, and we're beginning to roll out our robust trauma-informed training for our teachers, job-embedded coaching for our schools to make sure that teachers feel supported in this journey, in this work, as well as meet the needs of students and families. Next slide, please. So at this time, I know I provided you with a lot of information, but I wanted you to kind of get the total picture of the multiple areas in which we were addressing with this work. Our model for trauma-informed practices talks about starting with a change in knowledge, and that is change in knowledge for everyone. So we're looking at making sure that our teachers are trained, our administrators are trained. We're going out to do parent trainings called We Are Here to Serve You presentations. So we'll be more than willing to come to whatever parent group to kind of have presentations. And then we're looking when we have our students to come back into our school from in the traditional format, we're looking to have student training where they can do training classes on conflict resolutions, understanding their own trauma, understanding how to address situations, how to advocate for themselves throughout this process. And so with that being said, we are engaging in this work of transforming the code of conduct. And we have people from all different departments within our school district. We have teachers on the committee, administrators, support staff, counselors, clinicians. We have students on the committee as well as parents. But tonight, what we wanted to do is we wanted to extend feedback from the parents. Although we have parents on the committee, we wanted to give the info, really reach out to a larger group of parents to get your feedback, get your concerns, get your thoughts about what needs to happen and what your suggestions that needs to be changed in our code of conduct. So we're looking at 3 areas tonight for our presentation. One is expected behaviors in the classroom. Group 2 will focus on dress code, and group 3 will focus on cell phone policy and social media. So we have the different excerpts from our current code of conduct that we ask that you review and provide us with feedback. Please, by all means, we look forward to receiving emails from you from your review of the code of conduct. We really encourage you to read the entire code of conduct and provide feedback. But tonight we're looking at those 3 sections due to the length of time that we have. So thank you so much for being a part of this presentation this evening, and we appreciate feedback and support on our journey of becoming a trauma-informed school district and creating a trauma-informed code of conduct. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you for joining us for our DAC meeting. Again, a copy of the final code of conduct as well as other presentation materials will be available on the DAC site. So it'll be the full code of conduct and the 3 sections Dr. Woodley mentioned that had the page numbers on the previous slide. Pages 11 through 14 is what the DAC meeting looked at, or the DAC body looked at and had breakout room discussion on November 11th. If you have feedback that you would like to provide to the code review team, who can they contact, Dr. Woodley?
If you'd like to provide feedback, feel free to email me. My email is lwoodley@kcpublicschools.org. I will be more than happy to share it with our discipline officer, Mr. Daring Washington, and the different teams that are working on this work.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Woodley.